From his intense fighting style to his underdog status, here are all the reasons why Sean O'Malley will destroy Aljamain Sterling at UFC 292. O'Malley is one of the biggest names in the UFC, so it's no surprise that his first run at the championship belt is a pretty big deal to fans. The stakes are raised even higher for this fight, considering that Sterling is defending his belt for a world record 5th time. Both fighters have a lot to gain by winning this fight, but analysts and fans clearly favor Sterling for the win. Let's go over all of the reasons why that might not be how it goes down when these two step in the ring. Sean O'Malley is no pushover, and going into the match the clear underdog, he's bound to have something to prove once he steps in the ring. First, let's take a look at some of his recent fights. O'Malley boasts a really impressive 95% win rate, with his only loss coming from his match with Marlon Vera at UFC 252.
Yeah, we'll hear up. He fell down. We'll hear about it. Oh! Huge elbow from Shield. Good shot. Marlon Cheeto Vera.
One of his biggest wins was at UFC 280 against Petr Yan. This was another match that O'Malley went into the underdog. He didn't let that get to him as he took an easy win over Yan and earned himself a shot at the championship belt. It could be argued that going into UFC 292, O'Malley has yet to fight any real big-name fighters aside from Petr Yan. On the other hand, Sterling has proved himself in matchups against some of the UFC biggest stars, including Yan, Henry Cejudo, and TJ Dillashaw. This shouldn't be a problem for O'Malley, whose intense and effective fighting style has served him well throughout his career. One of his biggest strengths is in his footwork, where he shows a real aptitude for finding strong offensive angles. He does this by shifting his fighting style from southpaw to a more orthodox style based on the situation. When it comes to his boxing prowess, he uses his incredible speed to release stinging blows to his opponents before they have time to react. Based on his previous fights, O'Malley tends to play a defensive game, keeping his hands low and launching blows outside of his opponent's line of sight. This had made it incredibly difficult for his opponents to anticipate his next move, which is one of his greatest strengths in the ring.
Front kick up the middle.
He's doing it again.
And again, the hesitation. He gets another highlight for the real Sean O'Malley.
One unique aspect of his fighting style that has worked well for him in the past is the frequent use of feints. By baiting his opponents into opening up and punishing them, this tactic will have opponents second-guessing every move O'Malley makes. This is not a fighting tactic that Sterling has seen very much, so it is likely to throw him for at least a portion of the match while he adapts. The real threat is the fast and powerful kicks that he is capable of. Given that O'Malley prefers long-range tactics, it's no surprise that he uses kicks to maintain offensive volume at longer distances. It's clear that O'Malley is an extremely tactical fighter and incorporates a clear strategy into his matches to highlight his strengths and expose his opponent's weaknesses. But how does this compare to Sterling's fighting style? Sterling is a fighter who also uses a strategic approach to his matches. A strong grappler, Sterling can often be seen tiring his opponents out before taking it to the mat.
Now he's under the chin. He's up there. He's up there.
Joe, it's over. He's going to sleep.
He's gonna go to sleep.
Yep, he's going to go to sleep. He's going to tap.
And trying to take the win by submission. That's not to say that his striking is not on point as well. Sterling is the 4-time UFC bantamweight champ for a reason, with an overall win rate of around 90% and 4 back-to-back title defense wins. It's unlikely that he plans to give up the belt easily. To make matters worse for O'Malley, Sterling is a strong grappler and mat fighter, an area where O'Malley has shown some weakness in past fights. Reports state that O'Malley has been working on improving his grappling skills, but they likely won't match up to a pro grappler like Sterling.
Here, Aljamain Sterling pulling it off. Pursuing the finish down the stretch. Hammer fist surrender. Aljamain Sterling.
But his defense game could prove his saving grace, as it could be difficult for Sterling to get a hold of him and take him to the mat. Taking his opponents to the fence and working them down to the mat is a key part of Sterling's fighting strategy. As I mentioned earlier, O'Malley uses his strong offensive kicks to keep the distance, which is going to make cornering him at the fence pretty difficult. Now, it wouldn't be UFC without some good pre-fight drama, so let's get into some of the juicy controversies surrounding UFC 292 and the fight between Sean O'Malley and Aljamain Sterling. Things had been relatively quiet between the two up until UFC 288, where an altercation between the two would garner some attention. The two would trade insults and set the stage for their fight at UFC 292. It turns out,
real soon. So why'd you run? Why'd you turn down the title shot? Why'd you turn down the title shot? That's what I thought, because I'll drag your ass up and down this octagon.
Getting these two in the ring wouldn't be that easy. After his win against former champion Henry Cejudo at UFC 288, Sterling stated in an interview that he was not sure if he would be ready to fight at UFC 292 due to a hand injury he had sustained against Cejudo. This came as a shock to everyone, including Dana White and Sean O'Malley, as the fight had already been announced and promoted. If you have been following Sterling's career, you might have noticed that he has a habit of dropping out of fights. So fans in the top brass at the UFC took these claims seriously. Sterling's comments prompted UFC president Dana White to host a press conference where he assured everyone that the fight was happening no matter what. He made this statement after getting in touch with Sterling and confirming that he was cleared to fight.
Aljo's up this whole press conference tonight. No, I don't think so. I don't know what Aljo's doing. Aljo will be in Boston versus O'Malley.
This would be the quickest turnaround in Sterling's career, so him wanting some extra time off to prepare makes sense. O'Malley is simply not having any of it, though. He would go on to say in an interview that Sterling should have had plenty of time to heal up before the fight and that he lacks discipline. In his eyes, Sterling was just making excuses to duck the match. Sterling would clap back, stating that O'Malley had only fought once in the past year and that he was only showing up for UFC 292 for the fans. There is some truth to that statement, as going into UFC 292, Sterling had been much more active in the ring than O'Malley. Sterling had even gone so far to say that the UFC was actively trying to strip him of the title by allowing O'Malley extra time off to improve his grappling and scheduling him in back-to-back title fights without much time to train. While these claims are mostly unfounded, it wouldn't be surprising if the top brass at the UFC are getting tired of seeing Sterling wear the belt. In spite of these accusations, O'Malley is still going into the fight a major underdog. Analysts and fans alike predict a blowout victory for Sterling, but just like in his fight against Petr Yan, O'Malley has shown that he can pull big victories under pressure and scrutiny. In fact, going into the fight, a serious underdog could be one of his strongest advantages. Going into UFC 292, O'Malley has something to prove, and his first shot at the title is the best place to show off just how far he has come in his career. There's no question that he knows he is in for a challenge. O'Malley's head coach Tim Welch has even gone on record calling Sterling the most dangerous bantamweight champion there's ever been. Welch believed that even a small mistake against a fighter like Sterling could cost the whole match. No matter who you are rooting for, UFC 292 is definitely going to be one to remember. Although Sterling has a clear advantage, it wouldn't be wise to count out O'Malley, who has proven he has what it takes to go toe-to-toe with some of the best fighters in the UFC. So from his intense fighting style to his underdog status, these were all the reasons why Sean O'Malley will destroy Aljamain Sterling at UFC 292.